The emergency alarms screamed through the corridors of the UE's adamantine like wounded animals. And Captain Yara Okonkwo gripped the armrest of her command chair as the entire ship shuddered and groaned around her. "Report!" she shouted over the chaos, her dark eyes scanning the bridge where her officers scrambled at their stations with desperate urgency. "Engines are down." "Captain," Navigation Officer Tomas Reyes called back, his fingers flying across his console as red warning lights painted his face in bloody hues. "Someone cut the primary fuel lines from inside the ship. And the backups are failing too. Life support is dropping," another voice added from across the bridge. "We have maybe 6 hours before the air gets too thin to breathe. Weapons are completely offline," Security Chief Marcus Cole reported through gritted teeth, his scarred hands clenched into fists at his sides. "This was not an accident, Captain. And this was a coordinated attack from within our own hull." Okonkwo rose from her chair with the calm authority that had earned her command of this vessel, and she looked at each of her officers in turn before speaking in a voice that cut through the panic like a blade. "Then we have saboteurs aboard," she said simply. "How many and where are they now?" The answer came not from her crew, but from the main communication screen, which flickered to life with the image of a creature that made several of her younger officers step back in fear. The Valkyrie were tall and thin, with skin like gray leather stretched over angular bones, and their eyes were solid black orbs that reflected no light and showed no mercy. "Human Captain," the alien spoke in a voice that sounded like stones grinding together, "your vessel now belongs to the Valkyrie Dominion, and you will surrender your crew for processing, or you will drift through the void until your oxygen runs out and your bodies freeze." "Processing," Okonkwo repeated the word flatly. "You mean slavery. We mean purpose," the Valkyrie commander replied with what might have been a smile if the creature had lips. "Your kind is strong and resilient, and you will serve well in our mining colonies. So be grateful we offer this mercy instead of simply letting you die. And if we refuse, then our mothership arrives in 4 hours, and 300 of our warriors will board your crippled vessel and take what they want regardless of your wishes." The alien leaned closer to the screen. "You cannot run, and you cannot fight, and you cannot call for help because we have disabled your long-range communications as well." The screen went dark, and for a long moment, the only sound on the bridge was the wailing of alarms and the hiss of failing systems. "Captain," Cole said quietly, "we have confirmed 6 Valkyrie operatives aboard, and they infiltrated during our last resupply at Kepler Station, hiding among the temporary dock workers. Where are they now?" "Scattered throughout the ship, probably waiting for their mothership to arrive so they can help with the boarding operation." Okonkwo nodded slowly, her mind already racing through possibilities that would have seemed insane to anyone who did not know humans the way she knew them. "Get me Chief Engineer Volkov," she ordered, "and Dr. Singh from Medical, and tell them to meet me in the main cargo bay in 10 minutes. "Captain," Reyes spoke up hesitantly, "what are we going to do? Because the engines are destroyed, and we have no weapons, and help is days away, even if we could send a distress signal." Okonkwo turned to face her navigation officer, and something in her expression made him straighten in his seat with renewed attention. "The Valkyrie think they have killed our ship," she said. "They think we are helpless prey waiting to be collected. But they have made a mistake that their kind has been making since they first encountered humanity." "What mistake, Captain?" "They assume that a crippled ship means a defeated crew." Okonkwo moved toward the bridge exit, and her voice carried a cold certainty that sent shivers down the spines of everyone who heard it. "They assume that taking away our tools means taking away our ability to fight. But they do not understand what humans really are." She paused at the doorway and looked back at her bridge crew with eyes that burned with fierce determination. "We are not a species that surrenders when things look hopeless," she continued. We are the descendants of people who survived ice ages with stone tools and crossed oceans in wooden boats and walked on the surface of the moon within a single lifetime of inventing powered flight. What do you need us to do? Cole asked, and there was something new in his voice now. Something that sounded almost eager. Prepare the crew for combat operations, Okonkwo replied. Every single person on this ship, from the cooks to the cargo handlers. And I want everyone armed with whatever they can carry. Armed with what, Captain? Because the weapons locker is sealed, and we cannot access it. Okonkwo smiled then. And it was not a pleasant expression. This ship is carrying 300 tons of terraforming equipment, she said. Industrial chemicals and mining explosives and construction tools designed to reshape entire planets. And you are telling me we have nothing to fight with? She stepped through the doorway and called back over her shoulder. The Valkyrie expect us to wait here and die or surrender. But we are going to do something they never imagined possible. What is that, Captain? We are going to turn this entire ship into a weapon, Okonkwo said. And when their mothership arrives expecting easy prey, they are going to learn why humanity is the most dangerous species in the galaxy, in the depths of the adamantine, hidden in maintenance shafts and storage rooms. 6 Valkyrie operatives waited patiently for their mothership to arrive. And they felt no concern at all, because they had done this dozens of times before with dozens of other species cripple the ship and wait for backup and collect the survivors for the slave markets. And it was simple and efficient and always worked as they waited in the darkness. They began to notice something strange happening throughout the vessels. Humans were not crying or praying or hiding in their quarters. And they were not trying desperately to repair the damage or send distress calls that would never reach anyone in time. Instead, the humans were moving with purpose and energy, carrying equipment through the corridors, and talking in low, urgent voices about things the Valkyrie could not quite hear. One of the operatives sent a message to his companions through their private communication channel. The prey is behaving incorrectly, he reported. They should be panicked and desperate, but they seem almost excited. It does not matter, another operative replied. They cannot repair their engines or weapons. So whatever they are doing is meaningless. But deep in his chest, in the place where instinct lived, the first operative felt something he had not experienced in many years of hunting lesser species. He felt the cold touch of doubt, and, somewhere on the bridge of the approaching mothership, the Valkyrie commander reviewed the status of the captured human vessel and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. In 4 hours, he would have 200 new slaves and a ship full of valuable cargo, and the humans would learn their proper place in the galaxy. He had no way of knowing that in 4 hours, he would learn something far more important. Would learn why every species that had ever underestimated humanity had lived just long enough to regret it. Chief Engineer Dmitry Volkov was a massive man with hands like industrial clamps and a beard that had never seen a razor in 20 years. And when Captain Okonkwo explained her plan, his weathered face split into a grin that would have terrified small children. "You want me to weaponize the entire ship?" he said slowly, rolling the idea around in his mind like a man tasting fine wine. "Every system and every component and every single piece of cargo. Can you do it in 4 hours?" Volkov laughed, and it was a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside. "Captain, I have been an engineer for 30 years, and I have been waiting my entire career for someone to ask me that question." Dr. Amara Singh stood nearby with her arms crossed, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her dark eyes sharp with intelligence behind her glasses. "I assume you have a role for medical as well," she said calmly, "because I did not walk down here just to watch Dmitry play with power tools. The Valkyrie will expect us to fight with guns and knives." Okonkwo replied. "They will not expect chemical weapons and biological agents and medical equipment turned into instruments of war. Singh nodded slowly, and a small smile crept across her face. I have sedatives that can knock out an elephant, and surgical lasers that can cut through bone, and enough anesthetic gas to fill every corridor on this ship, she said thoughtfully. Give me 2 hours, and I will have things ready that will make those gray-skinned monsters wish they had chosen easier prey. Do it, Okonkwo ordered. And coordinate with Volkov, because we need to control exactly when and where these weapons activate. The three of them walked through the cargo bay, where dozens of crew members were already working under emergency lighting, pulling open crates and sorting through equipment with focused determination. Captain, a young cargo handler named Jin spoke up as they passed. Is it true what they are saying, that we are going to fight back against the Volcari? It is true, but they have a warship with hundreds of soldiers, and we are just a freighter with no weapons. Okonkwo stopped and turned to face the young man, and her voice carried across the entire cargo bay so that everyone could hear. Let me tell you something about our species, she said. 300 years ago, our ancestors faced something called the Resource Wars, and nations fought each other with everything they had until the entire planet was burning. I know the history. Captain, then you know what happened next, Okonkwo continued. When the governments fell and the armies were destroyed and billions of people were left with nothing but ruins and radiation, humanity did not die. And do you know why? Jin shook his head. Because our ancestors developed something they called the doctrine of necessity, Okonkwo explained. It is a philosophy that says when everything is taken from you, everything becomes a weapon, and when you have nothing left to lose, you become impossible to defeat. She gestured at the cargo containers. Surrounding them, we have 300 tons of terraforming chemicals that can burn through metal or poison the air or create explosive reactions on contact with water, she said. We have mining equipment designed to cut through solid rock and construction tools that can shape mountains. And every single item in this cargo bay was designed to be extremely dangerous if used incorrectly. So we use them incorrectly, Volkov added with a dark chuckle. We use them very incorrectly indeed. The Volcari think they have trapped us, Okonkwo finished. But they have actually locked themselves in a cage with 200 humans who have absolutely nothing left to lose and 4 hours to prepare. Jin's fear had disappeared, replaced by something that looked almost like eagerness. What do you need me to do, Captain? Start moving the chemical containers to the locations Volkov marks. And be very careful, because some of this material is extremely volatile. Yes, Captain. As Jin ran off to begin his work, Okonkwo moved through the cargo bay, giving orders and organizing her crew with the precision of a military commander preparing for battle in the engine room. Volkov gathered his engineering team around him and began explaining his modifications to the ship's damaged power systems. We cannot repair the main engines in time, he said. But we do not need to go anywhere, so instead we are going to reconfigure the reactor for something much more useful. What kind of reconfiguration? His assistant asked nervously. The reactor creates a powerful magnetic field when it operates normally, Volkov explained while pulling up technical diagrams on a portable screen. But if we remove certain safety limiters and adjust the field geometry, we can create a single massive pulse of electromagnetic energy, an EMP, the assistant breathed. That would fry every electronic system within kilometers, including the Valkyrie mothership. Volkov confirmed with satisfaction. They will come in close to board us, and when they do, we will knock out their entire ship with one shot. But will that not destroy our own systems too? It absolutely will, Volkov admitted cheerfully. But by the time we use it, we will not need our systems anymore. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Dr. Singh was conducting a very different kind of preparation. These sedative canisters can be attached to the ventilation system, she explained to her medical staff. When activated, they will flood specific sections of the ship with gas that will render anyone unconscious within seconds. What about our own crew? A nurse asked. We will have masks, Singh replied. The Valkyrie will not, and even better. We have modified the gas mixture to work specifically on their biology based on the research we captured during the first contact wars. She held up a small device that looked like a flashlight. These are surgical lasers rated for precision cutting, she continued. But if you remove the focusing lens and increase the power setting, they become weapons that can burn through armor at close range. Doctor, is this really ethical? Another staff member asked hesitantly. Singh's expression hardened. The Valkyrie have enslaved 17 different species, she said coldly. They work their captives to death in mining colonies and breeding facilities. And they consider any race without faster-than-light travel to be livestock rather than people. She handed the modified laser to the nearest crew member. Medical ethics require me to do no harm, she concluded. Letting those monsters take this crew would violate that oath far more than anything I am preparing today. Across the ship, similar scenes were playing out as the crew of the Adamantine transformed their wounded vessel into a trap that would have impressed the most devious military minds in human history navigation. Officer Reyes calculated approach vectors and timing. Windows Security Chief Cole organized hunting parties to deal with the saboteurs still hiding aboard cargo. Handlers became demolition experts as they learned which chemicals to combine and where to place them for maximum effect. And in the darkness of the maintenance shafts, the Valkyrie operatives began to realize that something had gone terribly wrong. They are sealing off sections of the ship, one operative reported, creating choke points and dead ends throughout the vessel. They are also moving cargo to strange locations, another added, placing containers in corridors and stairwells where they will block movement. This is not the behavior of frightened prey, a third operative said with growing unease. This is the behavior of predators preparing their hunting ground. The lead operative considered this information and felt that cold doubt spreading through his chest like ice water. He had hunted many species across many worlds, and he knew the difference between the panicked movements of victims and the purposeful preparations of something dangerous. For the first time since boarding the human ship, he wondered if perhaps the Valkyrie had made a terrible mistake. Security Chief Marcus Cole had hunted dangerous prey on a dozen different worlds before joining the merchant fleet. And as he moved through the darkened corridors of the Adamantine, he felt the familiar thrill of the chase singing through his blood. Remember, he whispered to the 5 crew members following behind him. The Valkyrie evolved as ambush predators, and they are used to hunting species that run and hide and beg for mercy. What do we do differently? Asked a young woman named Vasquez, who worked in the cargo bay and had never held a weapon before today. We do not run, Cole replied with a thin smile. We hunt them right back, and we make sure they know that we are coming. He held up the improvised weapon in his hands, a fire extinguisher that had been modified with a pressure gauge and a narrowed nozzle. Carbon dioxide under high pressure, he explained. It will freeze exposed flesh on contact and blind anything with eyes. And it is completely silent until it hits. Vasquez nodded and gripped her own weapon tighter. A length of electrical cable that could deliver enough voltage to stop a heart. Move out, Cole ordered. Stay together and watch the shadows, because that is where they like to hide. The hunting party moved through the ship like ghosts, their footsteps soft on the metal deck plates and their breathing slow and controlled in the maintenance shaft above them. A Valkyrie operative watched their approach with confusion and growing alarm. These humans should have been cowering in their quarters or making desperate attempts to repair their broken ship. But instead they were actively searching for the saboteurs with weapons in their hands and determination on their faces. The operative considered his options. Carefully, He could stay hidden and wait for the mothership to arrive. Or he could attack now while he still had the element of surprise. He chose to attack the Valkyrie, dropped from the ceiling with a screech that should have frozen his prey in terror, his clawed hands reaching for the nearest human throat. But Cole had been expecting exactly this, and he spun with the speed of a man who had spent his life in violent situations. The fire extinguisher roared, and a blast of frozen gas struck the Valkyrie directly in the face. The alien screamed and stumbled backward, clawing at his eyes as ice crystals formed on his gray skin before he could recover. 3 crew members hit him with electrified cables, and the Valkyrie went down in a twitching heap. 1 down, Cole said calmly as he checked that the alien was truly unconscious. 5 to go. He keyed his communicator and reported to the bridge. Captain, we have neutralized the first operative in Section 7, and we are moving to the next target zone. Excellent work, Chief, Okonkwo's voice replied. But be careful, because the others will have heard that scream, and they know now that we are hunting them. Let them know, Cole said with grim satisfaction. Let them feel what it is like to be prey for once. Throughout the ship, similar scenes played out as the crew of the Adamantine hunted down the remaining saboteurs with ruthless efficiency in the engineering section. Volkov himself cornered a Valkyrie operative who had been trying to cause more damage to the ship's systems. The alien was fast and strong, but Volkov was a man who had spent 30 years lifting heavy equipment and working in zero gravity, and his massive hands closed around the operative's throat with crushing force. You came to my ship, Volkov growled as the Valkyrie struggled helplessly in his grip. You broke my engines and killed my systems, and you thought I would just accept this insult? The operative tried to speak, but Volkov's grip was too tight. Let me tell you something about engineers, Volkov continued as he squeezed harder. We do not like it when people break our things, and we especially do not like it when those people plan to enslave our crews. The Valkyrie went limp, and Volkov dropped him to the deck with a look of disgust. 2 down, he reported over the communicator, and my section is now secure in the medical bay. Dr. Singh had prepared a different kind of trap. She had left the lights on and made herself visible through the transparent doors, apparently working alone on some medical equipment. The Valkyrie operative, who had been assigned to capture the ship's doctor, thought he had found easy prey. He crept closer, his movements silent despite his size, and prepared to strike from behind. But Singh had spent 40 years as a battlefield surgeon, and she knew exactly when the operative entered her killing zone. She pressed a button on the console beside her, and jets of anesthetic gas erupted from hidden nozzles throughout the room. The Valkyrie had time for one surprised gasp before the gas hit his system, and he collapsed to the floor in a heap of gray limbs. 3 down, Singh reported with professional calm as she stepped over the unconscious body and sealed the room behind her. The medical bay is secured. The 4th and 5th operatives died within minutes of each other, caught in traps that the humans had prepared throughout the ship. 1 triggered a pressure plate that released a cascade of industrial chemicals, and the corrosive mixture dissolved his armor and much of his body before he could escape. The other found himself trapped in a corridor where the gravity had been selectively increased to 5 times normal, and his bones shattered under his own weight before he could reach the exit. Only the lead operative remained, and he had watched the fate of his companions through the ship's internal sensors with growing horror. This is impossible, he whispered to himself as he huddled in a storage room deep in the ship's belly. These are prey animals, and they should not be able to do this. He tried to contact the mothership, his clawed fingers trembling as he keyed the communication device. The minion's grasp. This is Operative Prime, he transmitted. Do not board the human vessel when you arrive. And I repeat, do not board. Explain your warning. Operative. The commander's voice replied with irritation. "The humans have gone feral," the operative said. And there was naked fear in his voice now. "They are hunting us through their own ship. And they have turned everything into weapons. And my entire team is dead or captured. 6 Valkyrie operatives cannot handle 200 unarmed humans?" "They are not unarmed," the operative hissed. "They have made weapons from chemicals and tools and even the ship itself. And they are not afraid of us. We will arrive in 1 hour with 300 warriors," the commander replied dismissively. "Whatever tricks the humans have prepared will not matter against superior numbers." "You do not understand," the operative pleaded. "These humans are different, and they do not behave like any prey species I have ever seen. And when I ambushed them, they fought back like they were expecting it. Calm yourself, operative, and wait for extraction." The transmission ended, and the operative slumped against the wall with despair written across his alien features. He knew the commander would not listen, and he knew what would happen when the mothership arrived, expecting easy prey. A sound came from outside his hiding place, and the operative's black eyes went wide with terror. It was the soft scrape of human footsteps, and the quiet whisper of human voices coordinating their approach. He raised his weapon and pointed it at the door. But his hands would not stop shaking. "Please," he whispered to whatever gods his species believed in. "Please let them kill me quickly." The door opened, and Security Chief Cole stepped through with a cold smile on his scarred face. "Found you," he said simply. The operative fired his weapon, but his aim was ruined by fear, and the shot went wide. Cole's return strike did not miss as the last saboteur fell. Captain Okonkwo's voice came over the ship's intercom, and every human aboard heard her words. "The ship is clear," she announced. "Now we prepare for the main event, and when that mothership arrives, we show them what happens to those who underestimate humanity." Throughout the Adamantine, 200 humans cheered, and their voices echoed through the corridors like the war cry of a species that had never learned how to surrender. The Valkyrie mothership Dominion's grasp emerged from faster-than-light travel like a predator rising from dark waters. Its hull bristling with weapons and its cargo bays filled with warriors eager for battle. Commander Dex Valoom stood on his bridge and surveyed the human vessel drifting helplessly in the void before him. And he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction at how easy this capture would be. "Status of the target ship," he demanded. "No power readings from engines or weapons," his tactical officer reported. "Life support is failing and communications are offline. And the vessel appears to be completely crippled. And our operatives?" "No response to our hails, Commander." Dex Valoom frowned at this news, but he did not let it concern him overly much. "They have probably moved to secure locations to avoid the fighting that is about to begin," he decided. "Launch boarding pods and take the ship." "Yes, Commander." On the bridge of the Adamantine, Navigation Officer Tomas Reyes watched the mothership's approach on the few sensors they had managed to keep operational, and he felt his heart pounding in his chest. "They are launching boarding pods, Captain," he reported. 20 of them with approximately 15 warriors each. "Distance to mothership?" Okonkwo asked calmly. 3 kilometers in closing, and they want to be in position to support their boarding parties with covering fire. "Perfect," Okonkwo said with a predator's smile. "Volkov, are we ready?" "All systems are standing by, Captain." The engineer's voice came back over the communicator. "Just give the word." "Not yet," Okonkwo replied. "We let them commit to the boarding first, and then we spring the trap." The boarding pods crossed the distance between the 2 ships in minutes, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars as they carried 300 Valkyrie warriors toward what they believed was helpless prey. "First pods will make contact in 30 seconds. Reyes announced. "All crew to protected positions," Okonkwo ordered. "And seal your suits because things are about to get violent." The first wave of boarding pods struck the Adamantine's hull with magnetic clamps, and their cutting torches began burning through the outer plating inside the pods. Valkyrie warriors checked their weapons and prepared to storm through the breaches they were creating. They expected panicked humans cowering in corners. They expected easy prey that would surrender. At the first sign of overwhelming force, they did not expect what happened next. Now, Volkov, Okonkwo said quietly. The adamantine came alive. Emergency thrusters that the humans had carefully hidden from sensors fired in calculated bursts, and the massive freighter began to spin on its central axis like a dancer in the void. The rotation was slow at first, but it built speed rapidly, and the boarding pods that had attached themselves to the hull suddenly found themselves being whipped around in circles. What is happening? Commander Dex Valoon demanded as he watched his boarding force being flung about like toys on a string. The human ship is rotating, Commander, and our pods cannot maintain their grip. One by one, the magnetic clamps failed, and the boarding pods went spiraling off into space with their warriors screaming inside. But this was only the beginning. Rotation had loosened the hull plates that Volkov's team had carefully prepared, and now those plates began to tear free and fly outward in an expanding cloud of razor-sharp metal boarding pods that had not yet detached was shredded by the debris, their hulls torn open and their passengers exposed to the killing vacuum. They have turned their own hull into shrapnel, the tactical officer reported with disbelief in his voice. They are deliberately destroying their own ship to kill our warriors. Impossible, Dex Valoon breathed. No sane species would sacrifice their own vessel like this. But the humans were not finished. Pressurized cargo containers that had been positioned in the outer compartments suddenly exploded outward as their contents were released into space, and clouds of corrosive chemicals and frozen gases expanded toward the remaining boarding forces. Warriors who had managed to survive the shrapnel found their suits dissolving around them as the chemicals ate through their armor. Others watched in horror as the frozen gases turned their breathing tubes brittle and shattered them. Pull back, Dex Valoon screamed. All pods returned to the ship immediately, but it was too late for many of them, and less than half of the original boarding force managed to escape the killing zone around the adamantine. They have destroyed over half our warriors, the tactical officer said numbly, without firing a single conventional weapon. Then we destroy them from range, Dex Valoon snarled. Charge all weapons and prepare to fire on the adamantine. Captain Okonkwo watched the mothership's weapons powering up on her screen, and she knew they had only seconds before the alien vessel unleashed enough firepower to vaporize her ship. Volkov, she said. Option Omega now. With pleasure, Captain. Deep in the heart of the adamantine, the modified reactor pulsed once with more power than it had ever been designed to contain, and a wave of electromagnetic energy exploded outward in all directions. The pulse hit the Dominion's grasp like a physical blow, and every electronic system on the massive warship died instantly. Lights went out and weapons went offline and engines failed. And the mighty vessel that had terrorized dozens of worlds was suddenly nothing more than a drifting hulk. What have they done? Dex Valoon whispered in the darkness of his dead bridge. What have they done to my ship? The answer came as the adamantine began to move. The humans had saved just enough thruster fuel for one final maneuver, and now they used it to aim their wounded vessel directly at the helpless mothership. They are going to ram us, the tactical officer realized with horror. They are going to use their ship as a battering ram, emergency power. Dex Valoon screamed, Get me engines, get me anything. But there was nothing to get, and the Dominion's grasp hung motionless in space as 50,000 tons of human determination came hurtling toward it on the adamantine. Captain Okonkwo gathered her crew in the most protected sections of the ship, emergency shelters that Volkov had reinforced with every scrap of metal they could spare. Brace for impact, she announced over the ship's intercom. And whatever happens next, remember that we did not surrender and we did not give up. And we showed them what humans are made of. The collision was catastrophic. The adamantine's reinforced cargo spine struck the Dominion's grasp amidships, and 50,000 tons of mass traveling at ramming speed punched through the alien vessel's hull like a spear through flesh. Both ships screamed as metal tore and compartments ruptured and atmosphere vented into the void on the adamantine. Crew members were thrown against the walls of their shelters as the impact force exceeded anything the inertial dampeners could handle. 27 humans died in the collision, their shelters failing under stresses they were never designed to withstand, but 173 survived, held safe by the engineering genius of Dmitry Volkov and the desperate courage of a crew that refused to accept defeat on the Dominion's grasp. The situation was far worse. The human ship had torn through their engineering section and destroyed their reactor containment, and secondary explosions were ripping through the vessel as systems failed in Cascade. Commander Dex Volume hung in his restraints on the dark bridge, his black eyes staring at the destruction around him with incomprehension. "They sacrificed their ship," he whispered. "They threw away their only means of escape just to destroy us." "Commander," a weak voice came from somewhere in the darkness. "What do we do now?" Dex Volume had no answer. He had spent his entire career hunting species that valued their own survival above all else, and he had never encountered anything like this. He had never faced a species that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. He had never faced humans, and as rescue ships from the nearby human colony began appearing on the edge of scanner range, Commander Dex Volume realized that the Valkyrie had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that all prey species were the same. They had been wrong. The rescue ships from New Brisbane Colony arrived to find a scene of devastation that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Two massive vessels hung tangled together in the void, their hulls fused by the violence of impact and their atmospheres bleeding slowly into space. The U.E.S. Adamantine had buried itself almost halfway through the Valkyrie mothership, and both ships were surrounded by a debris field of shredded hull plates and destroyed boarding pods and the frozen bodies of warriors who had expected easy prey. "This is the rescue vessel," Hope's Dawn calling the adamantine. Captain Chun transmitted as her ship approached the wreckage. "Do we have any survivors?" For a long moment, there was only silence, and Chun felt her heart sink as she imagined 200 human lives lost to the void. Then a voice crackled through the static, and it was the most beautiful sound Chun had ever heard. "Hope's Dawn. This is Captain Yara Okonkwo of the Adamantine," the voice said. And despite everything, there was fierce pride in those words. "We have 173 survivors in emergency shelters, and we require immediate evacuation." "Copy that, Adamantine. And rescue teams are on the way." Chun paused for a moment, then asked the question that was burning in her mind. "Captain Okonkwo, can you tell me what happened here?" There was a short laugh from the other end of the transmission. "The short version is that the Valkyrie tried to take our ship, and we disagreed with their plans. You rammed the warship with a freighter. We used available resources," Okonkwo replied simply. "Speaking of which, you should probably send some people over to the Valkyrie vessel as well, because I believe they have survivors who wish to surrender." "Surrender?" Chun repeated with disbelief. "The Valkyrie are surrendering to humans?" "They have learned something new about our species today, Captain Chun, and I think they would prefer to discuss it from inside a holding cell rather than floating in the debris field." The rescue operation took hours, and during that time, the truth of what had happened spread across the colony, and then across the sector, and then across the entire galaxy. A human freighter with no weapons and a crippled engine had defeated a Valkyrie warship with 300 Warriors, they had done it with chemicals and tools. And creative engineering, they had done it by turning their own ship into a weapon and ramming it through the enemy's hull. They had done it because they refused to surrender when Captain Okonkwo was finally pulled from the wreckage. Her arm was broken and her face was covered in blood from a gash on her forehead. But she walked under her own power, and her eyes were clear and sharp. Commander Vex Volum was brought out on a stretcher, his body battered and his spirit broken. And when he saw the human captain standing on the deck of the rescue ship, he demanded to speak with her. How? He asked as they brought him past her, his voice barely a whisper. How did you do this? Okonkwo looked down at the alien who had threatened to enslave her crew, and her expression held no hatred, only a kind of tired satisfaction. You saw a vessel, she said. We saw metal and fuel and time, and you gave us all three. Vex Volum stared at her for a long moment, trying to understand. And then he shook his head slowly. Your species is insane, he said. We prefer to think of it as determined, Okonkwo replied. Now, if you will excuse me, I have crew members to check on. She walked away, leaving the Velkari commander to his guards and his thoughts in the days that followed. The incident entered the official records of a dozen different species, and the analysis reports all reached the same conclusion. Humans were not like other prey species. Humans did not surrender when their ships were crippled, and they did not beg for mercy when they were outnumbered, and they did not accept defeat as inevitable, no matter how hopeless their situation appeared. Instead, humans adapted and improvised and fought with whatever they had available, even if that meant sacrificing their own vessel to destroy their enemies. The Velkari Dominion officially requested that human shipping lanes be declared sovereign territory, not because they respected humanity, but because they feared what would happen if they ever tried to raid another human ship other species took. Note: the Keth Ari Trading Consortium quietly revised their insurance policies to exclude any coverage for vessels that attacked human freighters. The Zorval Collective updated their military protocols with a new classification for human vessels. Approach with extreme caution, and in the tactical databases of every major power in the galaxy, a new entry appeared under the heading Human Vessels. It read, Warning: disabling a human ship does not neutralize the threat, and it merely changes the weapon's configuration. 5 years after the incident, a young Velkari officer named Vexter sat in a military academy classroom, learning about the history of his species' conquests. Instructor, he asked during a lesson on raiding tactics, why do we no longer target human shipping? Because the records show we had great success against them in the early days. The instructor, an older Velkari who had lost 3 of his fingers during a failed boarding action decades ago, paused and considered the question carefully. We stopped because we learned something important about humans, he said finally. Something that changed everything we thought we knew about predator and prey. What did we learn? The instructor walked to his console and pulled up a file, and the classroom screens filled with the image of the adamantine buried in the side of the Dominion's grasp. We learned that humans do not see themselves as prey, the instructor explained. They see themselves as the apex predator of their world. And when you corner them, they do not run or hide or surrender. What do they do? The instructor changed the display, and now the screens showed an audio recording with a waveform display. This was transmitted from the adamantine to the Dominion's grasp. Before the collision, he said, It is Captain Okonkwo's final message to Commander Vex Volum. He pressed play, and the classroom fell silent for a long moment. There was nothing but static, and Vexter wondered if the recording was damaged. Then he heard it screaming, not the screaming of frightened prey, but the screaming of Velkari operatives being hunted through the corridors of a ship they thought they controlled. The sounds of his own people dying at the hands of creatures they had dismissed. as helpless prey, and under it all, almost too quiet to hear, was the voice of a human woman saying simply, "You chose this, and now you live with the consequences." The recording ended, and the classroom remained absolutely silent. "That," the instructor said quietly, "is why we do not raid human ships anymore. And that is why the Dominion has declared their territory off-limits to all Valkyrian military operations. But surely we could overwhelm them with superior numbers." Vexter protested weakly. The instructor shook his head. "Numbers do not matter against a species that will sacrifice everything to win," he replied. "The humans have a saying that explains their philosophy perfectly." "What is it?" "They say that it is not the size of the predator that matters, but the refusal to be prey," the instructor said. "And humans refuse more absolutely than any species we have ever encountered." Vexter looked at the frozen image on the screen, at two broken ships tangled together in the void. And he understood something that his ancestors had learned the hard way: some prey was not worth hunting, and humans were the most dangerous kind of prey. There was because they did not know how to be prey at all.